Hi, Bijou. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I've been really excited for this conversation because I've been following you on Instagram and definitely have my own experience with mushroom medicine, and also just really curious about the therapy that is becoming a little more well-known. So before we dive into all the millions of questions I have for you, will you tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me here. I always love talking about mushrooms. I was a serial entrepreneur, always was, and kind of knew what it felt like to be an entrepreneur. It's sometimes very lonely and very stressful. You feel like you're wearing all of the hats, and it's very easy to burn out, and it's very easy to make mistakes that are hard to come back from without support. And so I kind of went from my own businesses to then creating content and working on businesses and branding for other entrepreneurs. And I really started seeing their mental blocks and their fear to show up as themselves and all of those things that come up with being an entrepreneur. And I myself was trying to come up with tools and techniques that I could support myself and others with. And that's when microdosing kind of came into my world. And then I was kind of hooked. And I went in it with the biohacking desire and then came out with the full understanding of potentially what they could support a plethora of people with. And then I went and started doing my own psychedelic facilitation training. And then I realized that most people have huge blocks when it comes to love, sex, and money, and including myself at the time. And so that's when I kind of wanted to be able to support people in those capacities too, because entrepreneurs' love lives and sex lives also affect their businesses and their lives. And so I went and got another training to really support others and myself in that capacity. And I kind of merged all of those trainings together to form my own method for helping people.
Nice. And is that really where your passion is with entrepreneurs, or have you started to expand in different areas?
It started with entrepreneurs. That's what I put myself out as. But when I first came out, this was before the big psychedelic boom. And I think that the people that at first reached out to me were the ones that were really brave and inquisitive. But then once things like How to Change Your Mind and Fantastic Fungi came out, that's when a wider variety of people started reaching out to me. So honestly, it's quite wild. Like if you were to line up all of my clients, you would be shocked at like age, sex, identities, like all the different people that you would never imagine would be into this medicine were. And so I started working with other women and teaching them my methods so that like a specific type of person could work with them, because that was where they would shine. So for instance, I'm not a mom. And so there are two women that work with me that are and understand what it feels like to be a mom. And also I have a nurse that was a cancer nurse for 15 years, and she helps people who have really severe diagnoses get over the PTSD of that. And so a big variety of people have come to me, and I've been fortunate enough to support them. But now I'm also feeling really good about being able to get them their perfect match. And then I would say, yeah, I kind of shine with the entrepreneurial group, even though, like I said, I help all kinds of people.
That's cool. It's like you have a mushroom medicine boutique.
Yeah, my partner likes to call it my mushroom brothel.
Yeah, that's great. And what about this medicine for survivors of trauma? Have you helped with people like that?
Yes. And so that's one of the big reasons why I wanted to go get this sex, love, and relationship training, because it was trauma informed. There are specific traumas that I am not trained to support. And so if someone comes to me, I do work with a trauma-informed therapist, and I would just be the medicine consulting component of it, and they would be the ones that are supporting them. And so it really just depends. Like everyone is so vastly different with their past, their current environment, and their future goals, that it really depends what the right mix for them is.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Okay, well, let's talk mushrooms. So I am someone who's done a shit ton of psychedelics, and they majorly opened me up 100%. Like, I feel that before psychedelics, I was seeing in the basic colors that you find in a crayon box. And then after psychedelics, it was like, oh, there's patterns and there's textures and there's prisms. And that's how it really opened it up for me, because I'm actually not a creative. Like, I'm not an artist, right? I wouldn't think of myself as an artist. But after psychedelics, I could look at the world and go, oh, life is art. And this is so incredibly beautiful. I am a trauma survivor, an abuse survivor, and I was using recreational drugs as a self-medication, as a way to avoid my pain. So I did get to a point in my life where I was like, I can't do the drugs anymore. I had gotten into hard drugs like meth and some other yucky stuff. Interestingly enough, it was taking DMT with a friend that got me off meth. I smoked one hit of DMT and I never again touched this drug that ruins people's lives. So I've always felt like there's drugs and then there's psychedelics. And especially the psychedelics that come from nature, I feel, and I would love to hear your take on it. So I really want to hear your professional take on what the mushrooms do, but also I'd love for us to go into this dive, because I have this feeling that these plant medicines were put here by whatever it is, the creator, the divine, the universe, to give us a way back to the divine, like a remembrance of, just like this little key, like, hey, you get lost on your way, there's always a doorway back. So would you tell us what exactly is happening? What are the mushrooms doing to our body? Why do they have the ability to do all these magical things for us? And kind of, what do you think? Like, why do we have this beautiful medicine on our planet?
Yeah, so as a person who, well, and congratulations, by the way, it is no easy feat, but I absolutely believe it. I've seen many people who are very, very having a very complicated relationship with drugs and their past, to completely sever that tie that they had, which is just incredible. And my brother also has struggles with that. And so that's another reason why I'm really passionate about it as well. I was a functioning alcoholic, if I'm honest with myself, and thought I was going to drink the rest of my life. And I don't drink anymore. And it wasn't hard. And it wasn't even something that I went in desiring to do when I started working with the medicine. But yeah, I would say I was very, as they would say, maybe straight edge other than alcohol up until way after college. I had never tried anything really. And so my first experience was with LSD, and that was like, whoa, oh my gosh. And so, like my personality does, I went in like full bore and tried everything and anything that was a psychedelic. And I really started trying to understand what they are all for. And so I would say that I have obviously a bias, but I understand personally what plant medicines are good for what. So like, for instance, cannabis, it is a dissociative. So it does dissociate you from maybe what you're trying to deal with. And that has a time and a place. But things like ayahuasca or ibogaine, like those can have their own special place in your life, but are not these things that you should be coming back to time and time again. And so the reason why I loved mushrooms is like LSD trips are incredibly long, and DMT trips and bufo trips take an incredible amount of integration support that is very rare, or at least was when I was working with it. And so mushrooms are really beautiful in the sense that they do dive you into yourself. They do bring up the stuff that needs to be processed, which I appreciate, but it does it in a very kind and supportive way, especially if you're using low doses. And it allows you to continue to work with it over a long period of time, which allows the brain to rewire because it takes time. And so, yeah, that's kind of why I started my love affair with mushrooms, and why I think that I've been able to find the root of the issue with most of my clients and even friends that I've worked with, is that we can take our time to let the things bubble to the surface, or we can dig in your subconscious and understand what are those narratives and those patterns and those wounds. And what is the deep one? What is the I am not safe, I am not worthy, that big one that your addictions stem from, and your money blocks stem from, and your issues with your sexuality stem from? Why? So it's really interesting to take the time and the presence and the intention to utilize this strong catalyst to support you in really knowing yourself, healing yourself, and then expanding yourself over time.
So are your sessions part like coaching, part the medicine?
Yeah, so it's kind of it feels like therapeutic coaching, where it's a microdose assisted session where we would find out what their normal microdose is to keep the medicine in their system, to support their nervous system and calming down and their neural pathways and opening up. And then we have sessions that are devoted to the layers of what a human is, so they really get to know themselves. And so they take double their normal microdose, and we do a Zoom session, and I take them through a visualization, and we start trying to let emotion come up, trying to let the ideas and the memories come up. And then we decide, since we are conscious and aware, what do we want there instead? Or is that yours, or is that your parents, or is that conditioning? And then once we've discovered that, it's very interesting because like the soul is open, and it's like, this isn't my truth, even though that's a program we've been running. And actually, this is more my truth. And then it just clicks in so beautifully when their medicine's in their system. And then over time, over the next couple of weeks, they do need to nurture and foster that newly planted narrative in their bodies and in their minds to take root and to grow and to flourish. And so that's like a combination of psychosomatic work and new narratives and flipping and reframing. And so if it's not addressing the body, mind, and soul, you're leaving one of those on the table. And that's typically why people aren't seeing long lasting change, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. It's just so wild to me that a mushroom is growing on the planet for us and can do all of this. Like, how is that even possible?
I don't know. I'm in awe all of the time. It's like they're beautiful little aliens that are truly intelligent. Like I love, they did such a great job with a Fantastic Fungi documentary on Netflix. I mean, there's mushrooms that they've used to rework the subways of Japan because of how fast and intelligently it grew through their maze that they created. And it's just like the things that you find out about this planet just blow your mind, and it is magic. It's just incredible.
So is that part of why we're now seeing this legalization come? Has there been a lot of studies and science is finally going, oh, this is a medicine? What do you know much about the history of how that's all happened? And for anyone listening, like, how do they find out if there's any legal issues for them to partake in this type of therapy, or is it just across the board, anybody can do it now?
No, so it's not federally allowed across the nation, but I do believe through the work of Johns Hopkins and MAPS Institute and a few other organizations that we will see like it be legalized way faster than we assume it will. There are states and cities that are decriminalized or legalized, and I believe that it'll happen much sooner than we think, especially because mushrooms especially are not addictive, and they are safe. So like literally there are more hospitalizations for table salt than there are for psychedelic mushrooms. And they get out of your system and then it's over, right? I think the thing is that back when they were looking into this in the 50s and 60s, they were researching all kinds of things. So like LSD and mushrooms and peyote and all kinds of things. And to the scientists, it does look like you're having a mental break. Like when I sit with some of my clients in a big experience, yeah, it looks wild. And it looks like, oh, this person is completely lost touch with reality. And that's kind of what we're going for, right? Like your reality is maybe a little bit small or broken or sad. So let's break that and let's form a new one. And so too, I think that the therapists and the scientists that were working with it just looked so scary and crazy that they were like, I don't know about this. And if you want to get a little bit conspiracy theorist, it was like the people that were doing those drugs did not want to go to war. They were like, screw war. I'm a happy little hippie and I don't want to do that. And so it was like, yeah, let's just shelve this for a while because we have an agenda and we don't understand this and it looks a little bit nuts. And then fast forward to now, like big institutions like in London and here are doing big studies and seeing what happens in the brain, seeing that it lights up new parts of your brain and creates neural pathways very quickly and helps with PTSD, is helping veterans, is helping people with addictions, and is incredibly safe. So yeah, I think that it's going to happen really, really quickly. They're probably going to try to synthesize it to be able to make money off of it, but it is very much a medicine that anyone can grow for not very much money and have plenty to microdose on and really do a lot of self-work with. So I believe that we're going to see a huge shift soon, and it's going to be even more common than cannabis, if you could believe that.
You can grow your own. That's amazing. So I'm a plant person. I work with essential oils, and I have a deep communication with plants. And when you grow the plant that you're working with, there's just a huge difference. It's just like kombucha. If you go to the store and buy kombucha, that you're not even scratching the surface of what that medicine can do for you, where if you grow your kombucha in your house. So that just gives me chills to kind of think about growing your own mushrooms, having a relationship with this, what you're saying, intelligence, maybe possibly even not of this planet. We don't know. We still don't know what mushrooms are. So that's so cool. So for the listeners who maybe have read a bunch of fairy tales, right? You're not talking about the red mushrooms with the white dots. What is the actual mushroom species that we're talking about here?
Yeah, so I mean, there were people in history that were using Amanita for maybe a psychedelic experience. It is hard and complicated to have like a truly psychedelic experience with that mushroom. It has maybe some components that people still utilize today, but the ones that are getting all of the buzz in the news are the psychedelic components, which most of them are cubensis mushrooms. Those are the most prolific and easy to grow. And so there's 200 different types of psychedelic mushroom out of the freaking millions and billions of types of mushrooms that are on this planet. And so it depends. Some of them are much harder to grow. Some of them are easier. There's, I think, 4 different types that actually have the like psychedelic component or the psilocin component. And yeah, so they all look very different. They're all grown in spores. So honestly, the size of a shoebox with just 2 different types of substrates put together and some spores, someone with a little bit of practice could learn how to grow their own medicine. And just 1 or 2 flushes from that grow where you get to watch them and connect with them and play music for them and put crystals in there if you want to. It's very fun to watch them come up and you see their personality and you develop this relationship with them. You start talking to them, you tell them what your intention is, and just growing 1 or 2 flushes could give you enough for an entire half of a year of microdosing.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's really, it's beautiful. And I believe a lot of people are going to get comfortable with growing their own medicine and or getting medicine from people who are passionate about growing, and then obviously getting some support too with working with this stuff, because that's what I would say is people get a little bit, ooh, this small amount got me somewhere, what can I do next? And that's kind of where the tension can form with people of like, let's not traumatize ourselves by taking stuff too fast and too much over a short amount of time, and like, let's be thoughtful and have reverence for this medicine and actually integrate the messages that are coming through and actually process in a big way through your body and your mind the stuff that wants to process.
Yeah. So that brings me to the question of, what are there people who should not use this medicine, or what are the concerns, the safety concerns? I'm sure when someone comes to you, you have an intake form, but what are the reasons that someone is maybe not a fit for this, or something that you look out for?
So if they have had a traumatic experience with mushrooms, maybe they did it recreationally at a concert while they were drinking and took way too much and really had a hard experience, they need to address that by moving slowly. Or if someone is on quite a few SSRIs or antidepressants, they're going to have a different dial-in experience and a weaning off and a tapering off experience if they desire to do that. Whereas other people, let's say you just had someone pass in your family, or you just went through a huge breakup or got out of a very toxic environment. There are people that are way too raw, in my opinion, to start working with the medicine and need to do some stabilization work before getting into opening your wounds back up. And so I would say that when I work with people, especially that first consultation, it's like, what does your past look like and how far away was some of that trauma? What is your current environment? Because if you're in a very toxic job or relationship, or a lot is unsettled because you're moving across the country, right now might not be the best time to soften you, because we don't want to break down all the walls that you've formed around yourself to live in the current environment that you're in. And then what are your future goals? It's kind of like people will think they know what their goal is, and then we like talk about it and we're like, I think we need to start a few steps back on that. So I would say that it's rare when and I talk to quite a few people that I'm like, this isn't the right fit for you right now, but it definitely happens. And I would say it's like, let's address a few things first before we start working with this medicine.
Mm-hmm. Wow, awesome. So exciting. So tell us, what do you have coming up? How do people work with you? What good do you have in store?
Well, it's crazy because when I came out about this, I thought it was going to take years and years and years before people would maybe catch on or be okay with it. And then I attribute a lot of the people reaching out to me to some of these really beautiful documentaries and news coverages that have come out. But I would say that it's working with one of the women that I've trained, if they're the right fit for you, and going through the whole 3 or 4 month situation, because that's the thing. It takes time for our brains to rewire, and it takes time for those things to bubble up and to reform new narratives and patterns. And so a lot of people will work with the medicine, get comfortable with it and with the facilitator, to then maybe do a bigger experience that everyone's talking about, versus just jumping right into these big experiences and not really being prepared for them. We're also going to start doing circles, because what I've noticed is I've done a bunch of masterminds where a bunch of people will get together and we will learn how to microdose together. We will integrate with each other. We will talk, we will have calls, and we'll have a chat. But I noticed that the more like niche they are, the better. So we're going to be starting circles that are for entrepreneurs, for moms, for couples, for women that are newly divorced or broken up. Who are you? Let's play with who you are now. Let's find who you are now. And so really a completely different program for each one of those different types of people. But the community aspect is the most important part, because as I'm sure you've noticed, when you've worked with medicine or you work on evolving and coming online and your spiritual awakening, you feel very alone, because the majority of your friends maybe are still doing some of those super unhealthy habits, or you just don't vibe with the general public anymore. And so it is really nice to meet other people who are going through the same stuff as you, and forming friendships and feeling like you're supported by more than just one coach, I think is really helpful. So yeah, it's kind of like, are you the type of person that's more suited for one-on-one work? Because we're touching on some pretty heavy stuff, and like, let's just dive in there together. Or are you just scratching the surface or trying to find like-minded individuals to integrate with? Then maybe the circle is more appropriate for you. And then we do really beautiful retreat experiences that are kind of like that big line in the sand of, we're going to have this big experience with each other, and then we're going to go back into our lives in a completely different way of being. And so I love the variety that I get to work with people in, because one-on-one on computer all the time is like a lot, versus like actually getting in person with people sometimes is just so heartwarming and fulfilling.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds great. So it's kind of like somebody does a introductory call with you, decides if they're a one-to-one or a group. And then once they've gone through enough of that, then they're ready to go to a retreat if they choose. Is it kind of something that you do throughout for the rest of your life? Like, do you have tune-ups? Is it like one and done? I go to a retreat and then my life is changed. Am I going to a retreat every year? What do you see?
Yeah, so what I love about properly integrating your medicine experiences is that they do have a very long run rate. And so for me, I've been working with this for 7 years. And when I first started working with it, I had a lot of work to do, and I consistently worked with it. And I brought up all my wounds and I brought up all my narratives. And now I intuitively, as new things come up, because that's what life is all about, I know how to use this tool now. And so for me, I have a lot of space in between my medicine work, and I'm not consistently using it. I will do dedicated microdosing containers, or I do one big trip a year to kind of wipe the slate clean, to move off all of the shell that I formed with the stress of life, and to download some new and beautiful ideas about my future. But everyone's different. Like, the amount of trauma and what you're trying to accomplish really will inform how much you work with the medicine. But I would say that the retreat experiences, yeah, I believe that's like once or twice a lifetime that you have like this big pivotal moment, and then it's just maintenance, keeping yourself soft and open after that.
It sounds like too, if you go through some kind of transition, like you mentioned, divorce or becoming a mom, or maybe you're changing careers, that could be a really good time to do some of the deeper uncovering.
Mhm.
Yeah, like that. I'm thinking of people already. You should go to that retreat. Awesome. Well, are there any parting words you'd like to share with us? Of course, we're going to put everything in the show notes so people can connect with you. I'll put those documentaries if people haven't watched them. And please, what would you like to close us out with?
Yeah, just thank you for being inquisitive, for wondering what this is all about. I do honestly believe that this is the future. And if you're interested in it, make sure that you do your research and your due diligence. Make sure that you have support. Even if you're working with your own therapist and a coach, and you just want to work with someone on what the right dose training protocol is to kind of couple in with all those other things, just make sure you're not doing this alone, and make sure that you're safe. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on and asking such great questions.
You're welcome. And thank you to the mushrooms and wherever they came from. And I'll also just want to honor the indigenous people that know the most about this medicine. So just big blessings all the way up the line to Mother Earth. So thank you. Thanks, Bijou. Okay, bye everybody.